Welcome to Goobertown Hobbies, my name is Brent. Today we're going to paint a random mini in a random paint scheme. This is Goobertown Roulette and I've got my rules right here, I've got my dice, and I have a bin of random minis. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pick a random bag out here and figure out what we're working on today. This one. Hope there's something good in here because we're going to spend a lot of time working on it. Whole episode rests on what's in this bag. Small. That's okay. Okay. So, more than a year ago, I actually packaged all these up. So, this is a Regiment of Renown. It's like a bandit character. He's cool. I think we can work with this. Now, of course, though, we roll some dice to figure out if he's actually a bandit or not. So, the first roll is for character type. This is kind of like movies and book tropes. So, we could get hero, villain, mercenary, specialist, sidekick, or comic relief. Let's roll that dice and find out. We got a 1, so that's a hero. Okay, this is not necessarily a bandit unless he's a Robin Hood type. We have one more dice to roll. This is for kind of the primary color of this model. 6. White or tan. Okay, so a light colored hero. I think this is gonna work well for us. This is a nice model. It's metal, highly detailed. I think this is gonna be fun. Let's get to it. Well, look at this guy. Look at that face. This is a bit of a stumper. This doesn't strike me as a particularly heroic face. For just a moment, I was at a loss. How am I going to make this schmuck into a hero? When has a hero ever had that look on their face? Once. One time in the history of heroes has a good guy had that look on their face. Luke Skywalker in The Empire Strikes Back. Luke just got his hand cut off and his parentage revealed. He's cornered, he's facing defeat, but he's still defiant. That's not true. That's impossible. I'll never join you. Okay, so maybe heroes can make this face when they're fighting against the odds. Maybe they're losing, but they're fighting the good fight right till the end. So who is this guy, and how are we gonna get this model to tell a story? At first, I thought maybe this young adventurer volunteered to hold off the enemy so his party could escape. Maybe in a tunnel or on a bridge. He could be fighting a horde of squigs. If I made a larger diorama, I could even include some members of his party running away as our man buys them time to flee. I was rummaging around looking for bits and inspiration when I found this. The box that this mini came in. I can't believe that I still have this. This Regiment of Renown box is in surprisingly good shape, too. Especially compared to the Birdmen of Contraza. Hey, Birdmen, get out of this episode. Go on, get out of here. Get. Anyway, that Regiment of Renown box still had a mini in it. It looks like I put 4 duelists into that roulette box, but I decided that a 5th might be tipping the scales a bit too hard. Do you want to know what the most likely draw in that Goobertown Roulette box is now? Halflings. Like a fool, I put 6 or 7 halflings in there. Someday that bill is gonna come due, and I'm gonna start drawing halflings. The good news though is that I'm starting to forget all the other stuff that I put into that roulette box. That means this game is just starting to get good. Okay, so we have a second duelist. That pretty much makes up my mind. We're having a scene where a hero and a villain face off against each other. The dice decided that the hero is wearing light colors, so I guess we'll dress the villain in dark colors. Let's decide on the scene. In my collection of Craigslist terrain, I found 3 possible set pieces. 1. This obelisk thing. It's a good size for a duel between our hero and our villain. It's ominous, perhaps important. That obelisk gives us the option of putting our hero up against a wall in a desperate situation. That's a solid possibility. Choice 2. Spiral stairs. This is a great sized fighting platform for the two to be standing on. Ledges on all sides, the stakes are high, this is a climax for sure. This piece is a bit big, but it certainly is epic. Option 3. Straight stairs. This is another great set piece. There's a nice cliff here, a visual cue that we're at the end of a fight. That upper platform isn't quite large enough for both of these figures, but we could have one pursuing the other. The bad guy could be on this platform here. He's cornered our hero and he's taunting him as he slowly advances up the stairs. This third piece is the one that I went with. Mainly, I like the similarity to that scene from The Empire Strikes Back. Luke is cornered on a one-way bridge that leads straight to a cliff. Vader is coming for him. With the spiral staircase, there isn't that feeling of linearity. It's not clear who's advancing and who's retreating. The design of this piece kinda sets the duelists in equally precarious positions. As for the obelisk, it's clearly at ground level. There's no cliff. This duel isn't necessarily at its climax. There's not that feeling of imminent loss or heroic sacrifice. It's a cool bit of terrain. I'll find a use for it someday, but not today. So here we are, a hero duelist, a villain duelist, and a set of stairs. Let's get them cleaned up and start doing some painting. Well, I finally did it. I finally decided to do a painting project with contrast paint. I primed them up with Stynylrez White, and I got to work. In a previous video, I talked a bit about Games Workshop contrast paints, and I talked about how to mix up your own similar thick washes with some art supplies that you might already have. These contrast paints are fun, but in America they're $8 per bottle, and at that price I wasn't gonna buy too many of them. Well, I got some earnest recommendations for Apothecary White and Black Templar. I knew I had this roulette video coming up and I wanted to support my local game store, so here we are. White and black are both tricky colors to paint, so I'm just gonna let Duncan and Peachy take the wheel here. Gonna slap on a thick coat and see what happens. The baggy and ruffled shirts of these duelists seems like a decent texture to test these paints on. They seem to do a pretty good job of washing down into the folds. Hey, maybe this'll work. The main clothing colors are white on the hero and black on the villain. For some areas, I did use a single coat, and for other areas, I gave 2 coats. For example, the hero's pants and tunic got 2 coats of Apothecary White, and his cape got a single coat. Both sections look decent, and this way the cape gets a distinct look from the rest of his getup. While that mess is drying, I took a look at the stairs. They're reasonably stable, but I think it might be a cool look to give the whole piece a nice wooden base. I've got a few bases on hand from the craft store, and this one fits pretty nicely. This fresh pine is too bright, so I decided to finish it with a bit of Danish oil. I've got this medium walnut stain right here. I'm going to rub some of it onto the pine to make it look fancy. It's really drinking up that oil, and I think it's gonna look good. I'll do a few coats of oil and see where we end up. Back to the duelists. I'm up to a collection of 9 colors of contrast paint now. Should I have spent that money on cat food instead? Let's find out. In the Goobertown spirit of staying open-minded and learning something new, I'm gonna see what I can do with these. If there's a reasonable place to use a contrast paint on these minis, I'm gonna do it. For example, the villain gets a nice dark red cape. They both get Guillemot flesh for their faces and hands, and it actually does a pretty decent job. They both have really silly facial expressions, but in the final assembly, the villain will be standing facing away from the viewer. The little diorama that we're making is all about the hero. And if we can see the hero's face, the villain will be positioned so that we can't see his face. That's actually a good thing. This guy will be way more ominous if we don't see that goofy looking mug. The villain got dark brown hair, wormwood. Jarrett the mini junkie made a great point that it's the brown contrast paints that'll get used the most. The hero gets a different shade of brown for his hair, gore grunta fur. These slotta bases are temporary, but I am gonna slop a quick coat of black on there to help us visualize how the minis are progressing. I love this step. Black paint was also used to undercoat the long steel and the short steel. Then I'm getting a bit of gunmetal paint onto those blades. I'm not using contrast paints for absolutely everything. If regular acrylic paint makes more sense, that's what I'm gonna use. With these sculpts and the painting technique that I'm using, this may be a pretty quick paint job. Let's switch gears for a moment and work on the stairs. These stairs are made out of stone and spooky skeletons. Or perhaps sculptures of spooky skeletons. Let's not ponder that question too deeply, let's just get them painted. Wildwood dark brown contrast paint for all the skeletons and skulls. I've decided to work fast, make snap decisions, and see how far contrast paint and a dry brush will take me. For the robes, I'm using this Vulpus pink color. Is this painted stone or something? What's this supposed to be? Dunno. It looks cool, so let's not worry about it. It looks maybe a little too bright and vibrant, but we can address that later if it's an issue. For the rock itself, I'm going to try the technique of using a variety of colored washes splotched on to add some interest and maybe even a hint of realism. Real rocks often do have a variety of funky colors swirling around in them. I started with pink since it was already open, and also in the hopes that it might better tie in the robes to the overall piece. Next up, Pterodon turquoise. Let's splotch that all over. Worst case scenario is it looks too silly even for me and I just paint the rocks gray. Okay, now a quick coat of black contrast paint all over everything. I wonder how this will look. Once that was mostly dry, I came in with some brown and I touched up any areas where too much white was poking through. This thing is starting to get a nice spooky vibe to it. When the stairs were finally dry, I took out a makeup brush to do an all-over gray dry brush. The more gray I brushed on, the better these stairs looked. Actually, this piece is turning out pretty cool. I kept working on those duelists, but they were rapidly approaching a state where they could be considered done. I knocked out their eyes real fast, just a quick horizontal slash for the sclera and a vertical mark for the pupil. There actually weren't too many other details on these minis that I thought were worth paying attention to. Since everything was approaching completion, I did a quick test fit. I put the stairs on the stained wood, and the duelists fighting up the stairs. They were each still on their temporary slaughter bases. Actually, that's not bad. I like how the villain blends in a bit with the stairs, and the hero in white is the focus of the piece. I did a final dry brush on the stairs, then I declared them and the villain done. I attached the stairs to the wooden base, I cut off the metal tag from the villain's feet, and I superglued him into position. The stairs and the villain are all there to give our hero context. Let's go back and give the hero one more pass before final assembly. For our hero, I did one round of highlights. One quick swipe of silver on the edge of his blades, and then I came in with pure white and gave a bright line on the highest points of the folds of his tunic and his cape. And I guess that's it. I'll admit it, the contrast paints saved me a ton of time on this project. And the white at least looks pretty great. I'll have to find more uses for that one. Finally, I cut that slaughter base off and glued our hero into position. Right there up against the edge of the cliff. Forced to retreat as far as he can go, and now we're at the climax of the battle. Desperate, defiant, and heroic till the end. So this wound up being a very quick and dirty paint job. But hey, it still looks pretty cool. I'll give some credit to those contrast paints, but I think in this case, the silhouette of the piece is doing a ton of work for us. I'm really glad that I found those stairs amongst my Craigslist terrain acquisitions. Also, finding that villainous duelist who hadn't been committed to the roulette box really made this all work. From the silhouette alone, it's clear that our man is on his back foot but still fighting, just like Luke in his first lightsaber duel with Darth Vader. I didn't consciously put the same colors onto the villain as I put onto the stairs, but it ended up being really effective. Our eyes get drawn to the hero. This is all about him and the way that he's facing this desperate situation. I'm really pleasantly surprised with this whole look. Sometimes when I paint minis, especially for a video, I put pressure on myself to dump a ton of time into the paint job, to try to show off in one way or another. Sometimes there are third and fourth and fifth layers of highlights or hours and hours of detail work. Not this time. Success in painting minis isn't all about spending tons of time on a project, or flexing and showing off some particular technique. Did you have fun? Did you learn something new? Did you let your creativity take you on a little journey? Do you smile when you see what you ended up with? If you're saying yes to any of these questions, then you're doing it right. This mini diorama that I wound up with is far from a technical masterpiece, but I think it does a great job at telling the story I wanted to tell. I always have fun doing these Goobertown Roulette challenges. I never know what I'm going to end up working on, but it's normally a great excuse to be creative and do something a bit different. This is the second time that I used this rule set for Goobertown Roulette with the character tropes. The first time I got a green villain, and that too was a really fun and straightforward project. This character trope rule set was also the rule set for the first season of the Goobertown Roulette League that I'm running with my patrons, and this episode is a celebration of Season 1 and a kickoff of Season 2. I'll announce the Season 2 rules in just a moment, but first, let's show off some awesome submissions from Season 1. I was blown away by all the submissions that I got. It's awesome to see how creative people are and the crazy situations that those dice force folks into. I decided to show off one entry for each character trope. Now, my picks here are obviously subjective. These winners, if that's what you want to call them, were chosen by me mostly because I think they'll be interesting to the folks watching at home. Some of the categories ended up being more competitive than others, but hey, that's Goobertown Roulette. You gotta be creative and lucky to be good at Goobertown Roulette. Hero. Okay, here's my pick for Hero. This elf spearman got painted white and tan and stuck on an awesome wood plinth. It actually took me a second to realize this was a dark elf and not a heroic high elf. The colors look great on it, and it just fits so well with the wood. The overall composition of this piece makes me really happy. Great job, Rispin. Villain. Shalissa Nightingale. Craig actually painted up two Nightingale sisters, Shalissa and Nella. They share the same tragic past, but they've dealt with it very differently. One is a noble paladin, while the other is violent and vengeful. These are some of the very first models that Craig painted, and he let me know it was his first time doing up some bases. It makes me so happy to see what a new painter can do, and I think it's cool that this little roulette challenge provided some inspiration for these early models. There's a lot of newer painters in the Goobertown Discord server, and it's been awesome to see the progression. Next up, Mercenary. This guy here is an independent contractor with boundless confidence. If he wants to wear green trimmed with some green accessories, well, that's exactly what he's gonna do. I actually chose to feature this submission because of how Paul chose it. He got his son to wade through his pile of shame to randomly select a box of minis. Then, the little fella rolled some dice to pick which model from the box would get painted and what the paint scheme would be. Then Dad got to work. The whole point of this roulette challenge is to have fun with it and to do something new. This was an adorable and effective way to get set up. Bravo. Specialist. Okay, James used this roulette challenge as an excuse to paint his sepulchral guard from Shadespire. Each figure got a color and a backstory for who they were in life. He ended up rolling two specialists, an advisor in white and tan, and a bodyguard / sparring partner in green. First off, these minis look awesome. These are really great paint jobs, and all of the different accent colors really work. The figures all came with thoughtful backstories for who they were in life. Commander, Nomad, Champion, Maniac, Tyrant. I think it's a cool idea to have the figures in an undead warband come from diverse backgrounds. But in death, they're all pretty similar and they fight for the same side. I feel like James might have bent a few of the roulette rules here, but I'm gonna let it slide. Such a beautiful little warband you've got here, James. Sidekick. Here's another entry with an excellent backstory. James is the name of this monk sidekick. No known relation to the James who painted those sepulchral guard. Anyway, James was a monk who had his life saved by a lovely adventurer named Antha. The two had an instant connection and they were an inseparable team for years. Sadly, Antha passed before James and he was left to adventure on his own, fondly remembering his days as an epic sidekick. He's on his own now, but his happiest days were when he was somebody else's sidekick. The story ends with an ominous hint about how James here might meet his end. This is a fun story. Great work, George. Finally, comic relief comes to us from Jimmy O. Jimbo. This silly Tau Fire Warrior here decided to dress up like a Tyranid. He's gonna play a practical joke on his mates. What a jokester. He better be careful though, or he's gonna get some marker lights dropped on him. The Tau are a trigger-happy folk, and this is a pretty convincing disguise. Whether or not this trickster survives the next few minutes, it's gonna be pretty funny. Okay, that does it for the featured submissions of the first season of the Goobertown Roulette League. Thanks to everyone who participated. Every single entry made me giddy when I received it. It's so awesome to see how much creativity, talent, and luck is out there. If your entry wasn't featured this time, well, keep playing. If by chance your Season 1 entry was nearly completed, send those photos to me anyway. I may yet find a way to feature them somewhere. Okay, Season 2 starts now. Previously, I was foolish and disorganized and I didn't put a hard end date on the seasons. From now on, seasons end at the end of every third month. If you're a patron, you can submit your Season 2 entry up until the last day of June 2020. A few favorite submissions will be featured in a Goobertown video in July. Time to unveil the Season 2 rules. This time, we're going to use the Magic the Gathering color pie to determine who our characters are. In the card game, the 5 colors of magic correspond to spell types and play styles, but they're also a way of understanding the motivations of the characters and creatures in the game. It's an incredibly well thought out system for understanding character traits, so let's put it to use in Goobertown Roulette. Even if you're not interested in ever playing Magic the Gathering, it's a fascinating way to think about characters or people in general. Also, learning just a bit about this popular game is probably useful information for goobers like us. In this season of Goobertown Roulette, we're going to grab a random mini to paint, and we're going to roll for what magic color or colors our characters are. Now of course, you're welcome to use the colors that you roll as paint colors on your mini, but Magic the Gathering colors also have much deeper meanings. Blue characters believe that knowledge is power. They work hard to learn useful new spells or secrets that'll benefit them. Self-improvement through education. Careful planning. They strike when the moment is just right. Black is ruthless self-interest. Morality is a handicap. You'll do what you need to do to look out for yourself and fulfill your ambitions. Red is the color of emotion and passion. They're quick to spring into action and they hold nothing back. Emotions are felt for a reason. They're not meant to be repressed. Green is balance, nature, and instinct. The raw power of the wilds can rise up to protect the natural order of things. White is society, laws, and the greater good. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Over the years, the 5 colors and all possible combinations of these colors have been very well defined in Magic the Gathering. It's a really compelling framework. I actually find it way more interesting to think about than the alignment system in D&D. Chaotic evil? That's such a crude description. Red-black? Now that has some nuance. Passionate and ruthless. So, for this season, roll 2d6 to determine what color combination your mini will be. 6s are wild, so choose something fun. Use this as a guideline to make a really compelling character. If you're interested in all this, I highly recommend Mark Rosewater's Drive to Work podcast. He has great discussions about the magic color pie, each color individually, and the various color combinations. There's also tons of great reading out there on this subject. Well, this was actually a really fun video for me, and I'm proud of this silly little piece. It's nice to be back on the wagon, the Goobertown Roulette wagon. And that does it for this time. As always, thank you so much for watching.